the choice maybe a mashup of multiple things. I think that's what you're aiming to figure out, because that's what makes you unique. Like, what is your mashup of things? Like for me, it was technology. It was my love for travel and my love for just problem solving, all combined into one, that I ended up in a career that was really what I'm doing has been my dream job. It's not what defines me. What defines me are those passions, right? And so that could evolve into other things later in life.
Yes.
So stay curious, do all the things, and really stop and reflect on what mashup of things like really speak to you. And look at the intersection of that and say, okay, what does that mean for what my brand is and what I do moving forward? Like those things are stable over time, and your career or who you work for, the title you have, those things could change. But the things that
core elements
should be stable over time. So that being said, if you're not tied to a specific title, a specific company, a specific, what should I say, manifestation of those core passions, if you're not tied to that, that means you could do a lot of things.
The show where we talk about data science in the Caribbean, highlighting practical ways that you can learn, get involved, and create your own impact using artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is the Caribbean Data Science Podcast with Mark Moyu and Jeff Sayon.
Hi, Deana. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting. Looking forward to the conversation.
Beautiful. So can you tell us where you live at the moment and kind of what you're working on? I'll leave the name out.
All right. So I'll give a little intro. So I'm Dr. Deana Anglin. Yes, use my title. I am a computer scientist by training, and I focus on user experience research currently. And so I work in big tech. So I, live and work in Silicon Valley. Just like, you probably heard about Silicon Valley. Just in general, I know you have specifically been here. I heard a lot about Silicon Valley, but it is what you hear. It's a place that draws a lot of people with big ideas, big visions, and some interest in leveraging technology to problem solve or do something creative in a great way. So it's a great area, I would say, for people starting out their careers, advancing their careers. For every stage, pretty much, there's something here for everyone. Silicon Valley does have its bad rep for being super expensive. And, if you're in tech, though, this is where it is. This is the heart of tech. And so regardless of the cost of living and so on, people really like to spend at least some part of their career here where they can build a network, meet people, and so on. So I've lived in Silicon Valley for this summer would make 7 years. So I'm probably at 6.5 years right now. Wow. And it's grown on me. California, the weather is a bit milder. It gets cold, but not too cold. It gets hot, but not too hot. So it's a pretty good temperature year round. It's, LA is a bit more hotter than here. So it's not the kind of hot heat you think when you think of LA. It actually does get cold, but it doesn't snow unless it's up in the mountains and so on. You have the coast, you have the beach. It's not a warm beach. It's still a beach though, right? And you have the mountains. I really love the diverse scenery here. It's far from everywhere in the sense that if you have to travel somewhere else in the US, like to the East Coast, it's like 5-hour flight. So that's one of the drawbacks. I've always said if I could pick up California and move it to where Florida was, that would be my ideal in terms of like beautiful diversity and scenery, the tech life, the culture. Move it to Florida, infuse some more diversity, some more of the good food from Florida, and the proximity to just everywhere else that Florida has, like to the Caribbean, right? That would kind of be my perfect spot, because I view myself as someone who is a global citizen. So yes, I live here now, but I don't view myself as tied to any one place. So
right.
I, travel a lot. And so it matters to be able to quickly get on a plane and get somewhere else, especially like to the Caribbean, since my heart is still there and I do a lot there,
Yes.
but I live in the US currently.
Perfect. So why did you, in a short way, why didn't you kind of tell us why you chose to work at Google, and, we'll dive into sort of your career journey more specifically, but what do you kind of want folks to know about, at least the way that Google has allowed you to express your professional career?
Yeah. So one of my mantras is just do hard things, and Google does hard things. There are lots of hard problems that they tackle, and they can tackle because it's more of a cultural choice, right? Where they took on a very hard problem of trying to organize the world's information. And so it's just in their DNA. There is this hard problem that they're still tackling to this day. And that spun into so many things. And so it's just a part of the DNA where it's like, hey, anything that others may view as impossible or challenging or too hard, that's like things that gets a Googler. A Googler is someone who works at Google. Very excited. And that's something that gets me very excited. So, because I view myself as a problem solver.
Yes.
That's kind of, if I could put that on my resume, that's what it would be. I'm just a problem solver. And I leverage technology as the angle to find solutions or imagine solutions to certain problems. And so I love hard, messy problems and being a part of understanding them and developing solutions that meet a person's need in the way that they would want it to. So that's kind of how I end up in user experience. It's just that passion to problem solve, but in a way that's meaningful, in a way that will design or create something that is actually going to effectively tackle the problem in the way that the person who we're solving for could have conceived it, right? Or imagined it. So from their perspective, and that provides a good experience for them as well.
That's a good one to keep in mind. I think at least when people think of solving problems, it's, just solve the problem.
Yeah.
Probably versus solving the problem for that person from their perspective. Yeah. And I like that extra added on requirement that you have to do it to satisfy that person unique perspective as well, right? I imagine in many cases.
Yeah. So when we talk about things like human-centered design or people-centered design or user-centered is really what maybe most people know, but users are just people and their people are humans.
Yes.
So just putting it back to perspective, when you focus on maybe saying user, you're thinking more from what matters to you. You want user as a business or as a product. That's still more from your perspective where you want users or you're assuming they even use your product. But when you think about, hey, we're just solving for people, really humanizes it. That is not about us. And they do have alternative solutions they might use or leverage that does not include your product. And so realizing that their problems are independent of your product by even saying, hey, we'll take up like a human-centered design. Let's really understand people as people and their needs from their perspective, not from our business perspective first. And then we design and solve their needs in a way that will ultimately, lead to us, yes, making revenue or having a larger user base. But the idea is that at Google, we have a mantra, focus on users, still use the users, focus on our users and all else will follow. Yes. And so that's really the heart of it, is like, let's understand people, solve for their problems, and the rest will the rest will come.
Very cool. So we do the show to encourage people from the Caribbean region to pursue what I like to call data-driven careers. And, you're not necessarily a data scientist, so people might be wondering, why is Deana on the show today? And to me, the real purpose is to show the breadth of different opportunities there are in tech. And it's not all about, let's say, AI and stuff like that. You actually need to interact with computers. And I think before I met yourself and another friend who's doing his PhD in the same topic that you did, I'd never really paid attention to or appreciated the amount of work that it takes to actually design things really well that humans interact with, and they might not even know that they're interacting with it. So can you share with us how your view of, from what you've done in your career, will play a future play a role in the Caribbean's future, essentially?
So I like that you talk about, you're trying to encourage people to go into data-driven fields, because the field I'm in is, it's data-driven. That is the heart.
Probably all data, right?
So I'm a researcher. I guess I didn't do a proper introduction. So my user experience researcher, computer scientist by training, and my path into research is coming from computer science. So the training I have, at the end of the day, they're different careers you could go into. So you could have gone into data science. I see us all as problem solving, taking different approaches. So I tend to be I lean qualitative in terms of my research, but I'm pretty much mixed methods, in the sense that it's a mix of qual and quant. But there are researchers who are like purely quant, and so they could also have gone into data science as well. But at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we are understanding people from lots of different perspectives, ways that are measurable and more objective, and then ways that are more based on their feelings and their emotions, right? And more qualitative, more anecdotal.
Yes.
So I think the both are important. And actually the best outcomes leverage an understanding of the data and what's happening, and leveraging more qualitative approaches like interviewing, diary studies, where you try to understand someone's experience in real time as they're unfolding, co-creation, where you maybe co-create solutions with someone, approaches that are more qualitative coupled with more quantitative approaches are really good to understanding what's going on and how much, and then understanding the why behind it, and then really how to solve it, and then really getting at the heart and going deeper into why some things are happening, which you may not do as well at scale, or just looking at your logs or things like that. So I think the two are powerful, and is largely the approach that I take at work. So we work on teams with different people. So, some may be more about quantitative researchers, some may be mixed methods like myself, and you may have your typical data scientists or your analysts. Like, we're all working with data, leveraging our different skill sets that overlap at times, even marketing, and really trying to piece it together to find an overall narrative of who the people we're solving for are, what are their needs, what are their expectations, how are they currently or not currently using our products, and why, what are their attitudes and behaviors as it relates to the products, or just in general as it relates to their problems and how they're going about solving for them. What is their experience like with maybe our products, and how are they using that, and what does that mean, and how can we improve that? So user experience really focuses on optimizing all the experience a user has as they navigate different touch points for your product or service. And so you have to have data, you have to have that understanding of what's going on as it relates to your product, and also as it relates just to their goals independent of your products. You have to have the full picture to be able to unlock opportunities to innovate, improve the experience, improve the outcomes, or just, do things differently. And so that's kind of the heart of innovation is this unending goal to just keep learning about people, and they never really stay the same.
Yes.
Their problems typically persist over time, but the way that they're looking for solutions may change. And so overnight, your product could be relevant if you haven't kept up with how they're looking to maybe solve their problem in a different way. Same problem, but maybe pandemic came and they're looking to get fed, a problem, I need to get food. I spent actually 4 years understanding how people satisfy their need for food. So I was a food researcher for years, which is probably the coolest job I've had, traveling the world, understanding how people satisfy their needs for food, and helping Google build their first food ordering platform. So I was part of that 0 to 1, going from idea to like launching in several countries. So I led research for that. And that was, a really good topic where it's like, we see the pandemic, people still need to eat, but they're looking to solve that need in different ways that are safer. And so like, you need to evolve as a product or a platform to respond to something like that. And you can only do that if you continuously keep learning about your users. What's the same, what's changing.
Great. And I guess I think now is a good time to ask that question. One of the hypotheses with the show is that since we're from the Caribbean region, we tend to be multicultural by nature, just because, we're seeing a bunch of different races growing up and talking to people from many different backgrounds, and having that embedded within sort of our everyday living allows us to just relate and see things slightly differently in the marketplace. Can you maybe speak to some of that in your job, in terms of you visiting different regions and having some of those heritage from your own country? How has that helped you to sort of progress your career so far, if any?
Yeah, it has. So I got into computer science with the goal that I saw a lot of problems around me, like in the Caribbean, and knew at an early age that technology was something that could possibly, it's not always a solution, but could really play a pivotal role in helping us tackle issues around literacy, job employment, things like that, in interesting ways. And I think my personal story was I was 8 when I actually wanted to get into computer science.
8?
I was
amazing.
8 in the Caribbean. My sister came home. That was the job she wanted to do. And I'm the youngest of 3 girls. And I just wanted to do what my older sisters wanted to do. So I was like, I'm going to be a computer scientist. I remember physically going to the library and asking them, what does this mean? Because I don't think my sisters knew. When they explained it, it was interesting to me because at the time, my dad, and I don't live in Kingston, which is critical because, I'm from Maypen. So people would say, oh, you're from the country. I actually didn't view myself as coming from the country until I moved to the US and met Jamaicans abroad. And they're like, oh, you're coming from the country. And I was like, huh? Because I had access to things that, we had a computer very early. And so my worldview was just broad. I remember really being interested in that box that my dad brought home, right? You could play games on it. And so when I heard what computer scientist was, and I tied it to, this box that he had at home, this was in the 90s, I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. So my sister went into medicine after that, and changed that she wanted to go and be a pediatrician, and I was like, no, not for me. So my parents, enrolled me in computer science camp in Maypen, Clarendon, early age. At my sister's high school, I was still in prep school at the time.
Yes.
Much to their dismay. And it was, again, interesting. And fast forward to 2000, I wrote an essay with the Cable and Wireless, is what it was called. How do you imagine technology shaping the Caribbean in the 21st century? And I won that competition. And it was just how I envisioned technology transforming the Caribbean. And I got access to like a new desktop computer and unlimited internet. And this was like 2000, right? So since then, I was like, you know what? I want to go to school abroad in the US. At the time, computer science wasn't really established. Wasn't at UE. So I was like, I don't have an option around me. I have to go somewhere else. But having access to the internet, going on the computer, being able to study and enrolling classes to take my SATs, like that just changed my whole trajectory. And so I viewed how having that computer changed me, and having access to information at the tip of my fingers changed me as a teen in Jamaica, not even in the capital. And so that is really what made me see, technology can help youth start new businesses. Technology can help us solve our own challenges in the Caribbean in novel ways. And I actually got into, in grad school, I focused on technology and international development specifically, because I really wanted to help unlock some of these connections to how technologies can help us transform certain things. So I spent part of my PhD research was focused on youth issues in the Caribbean and the role technology could play. So as part of that, I developed like a platform, for instance, that would help. Parental migration is like a huge issue in the Caribbean, and that leaves a lot of kids at risk. Their parents have no idea what's going on with them at home. They're left with caregivers. The caregivers may or may not share everything about what's happening with the child. Teachers may not know their parents. So I got into social media at the time and built a social network that would connect the parents, the caregivers, everyone involved with like the child's life, on one central platform. And I deployed it at a school in Clarendon as part of a pilot. And that unlocked a lot of insights, like, how technology could really bring together a network in ways that they could identify areas where the kids was engaging in at-risk behaviors, and they were able to, in more, faster, they were able to correct some of the certain behaviors or address it, or parents at least had awareness that they previously didn't have. Teachers had access to parents in ways they didn't have, parents who were living abroad. And so we saw how that improved the outcomes for those who were part of the pilot. So it's just things like that where now working where I work, where it's, or any big tech company, it's important that you have someone that could provide that angle. Well, how are we building this in a product in service of everyone or just for some? And so I'm always that voice of reason, where are we doing this in service of everyone? Because our goal is to do something in service of everyone typically, but maybe we don't always
know who everyone is.
Maybe the team isn't diverse enough to have different point of views. There's no one to call us out and say, hey, this is really just focused on people in the US with a certain income level or with certain access abilities. And so I'm sort of that voice of reason really on teams. And so, I think that largely has to do with the fact that I, grew up in a different culture. So I'm always able to see how something would work here and see how something would work somewhere else, or whether it would work at all. Like you just immediately know, like, this wouldn't quite work so well in Jamaica. So
people are funny in the Caribbean, man. They some very interesting ways. What were you like in high school in terms of your disciplines, strengths, weaknesses? Were you a super studious student? Were you a slacker like myself?
So it's interesting. I'm one of those kids where you shouldn't follow. I
Okay.
mean, I definitely stuck to the rules. I was definitely that person, the prefect, the first in the, first or
Okay.
second at least in the class. But what I mean is I also enjoyed life.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. Um, but I would get my studies done. I studied well under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
It just worked for me.
Okay.
And the reason I say I'm one of those you shouldn't follow is because, I could probably get by wait until last minute to study for certain things, where for the average person it would be too late. I think
Yes.
a part of it though is that for me studying is just it's not the point where I learn the content, right? So I very diligently do homework and dive deep into topics on an ongoing basis. So when it comes to like having to study, it's really just refreshing myself, like the knowledge is already there.
Okay.
So like I mentioned, when I was 8, just hearing that word computer scientist, I needed to go figure out what it was. So that's how I've always been, where I love learning. And so I would always, as I'm learning, try to go deeper into topics in whatever ways I could. And so point of studying was just, it was
Just
just kind of
recovering kind of what you
recapping.
knew already.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I could only do it very last minute. Like I just, yeah. So I would tell people, yeah, don't follow me because I'll get it done. I actually came first in the island for information technology.
Wow.
And others
Incredible.
and some other subjects, but that one was notable because obviously, like as I said,
It was
since
in
I
your
was
mind.
8,
Yes.
it's one of the interesting things is in the Caribbean was more women, at least in Jamaica, there were more women in computer science. So I have never had this idea, or in IT. We started out with IT, and then when you got to sixth form, you did computer science. So there wasn't this idea that I didn't belong. I think that's important to note, because you might hear people say, well, I think, it's more male dominated, or there are not as many minorities in computer science. If, you don't let that get into you because you belong, right? You're just as good as anyone else. And I think not having to deal with that at an early age, later when I had to deal with it, at that point, I was already stubborn, so to speak. Like, what do you mean? Like, all I know are women, minority women in this field before I got to college. And so I'm going to do this thing. So I remember, I say that because in college, when I moved to the US and I started school very early, college very early, I was in a class. There were other women at the time. There were other minorities, and by the end of the semester, I was the only anything, the only woman, the only minority, the youngest, and also the only immigrant.
No way.
Everyone else dropped. They changed paths because it was just difficult. It wasn't that it was difficult. It was really that they didn't teach it in a way that was accessible to people who did not learn computer science or AP in school in the US.
Okay, I see.
Or had a dad who did programming. So it was very much the way it was taught, and not that people couldn't grasp and understand the content.
They just needed to see it from a different angle and get that sort of extra attention.
And so it was difficult for me that first year. Don't get it wrong. I was like on the verge of failing. But I realized, like, hey, this couldn't be about me. There's no way someone like who in one country is in the top in this field could be at the bottom. There's something else that's going on. And luckily I stayed long enough to realize this wasn't a me thing. So I had to double down on like teaching myself.
Okay.
Spending lots of time. Sense. That time was still a little pre-YouTube. I'm dating myself, at least at that level. So it was physically like, getting help from others and and realizing I had to get this and not giving myself an alternative that really allowed me to graduate with a computer science degree from undergrad.
Wow.
And then yeah, maybe I'll stop there. I can share more about how that led to Google.
So you did, so the computer science makes sense, and I see math and Spanish, and to me that's such a beautiful combination in terms of subjects that give you a really wide base of things that you can go do after school. You know, computer science and math, like you have that under your belt. You know, to some degree, I think you can go to many different companies globally, in fact. And it's kind of cool that you sort of came out with that. But what led you to decide to do a master's? Because it seems, okay, did you like school or you didn't like school?
Yeah, so great question. My 8-year-old self that wanted to do computer science also wanted to have a PhD.
Oh, you wanted a, whoa, since then you wanted a PhD?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned to you offline that I run a nonprofit that's just focused on helping youth understand their purpose and passion very early, because I saw what that did for me. And I think it wasn't about resources or having the money. It was really just having had parents who allowed you the freedom to kind of find your own path.
Okay.
Right? None of my parents were programmers or anything. My dad did math. My mom is a jack of many trades, right? She teaches. She did actually do some IT at some point.
Okay.
She was a nutritionist. You know, she loves music and art. And I think she just exposed us, you know, they both exposed us to a wide range of things. And really focused on funding whatever it is we were passionate about. So for me to say, hey, I want to do computer science, and they enroll me in my older sister's tech camp, right? They're like, well, why not? You know, you're 4 or 5 years younger than the kids doing it, but why not? Why not you? And when I told them, you know, I want to go abroad, go to the US to do computer science, they never questioned it, not knowing really what that meant, or that I would ultimately end up at Google.
Wow.
Like none of that mattered to them. You know, they didn't push me to say, oh, just be a doctor, or these more traditional things where you kind of, the path is defined, even though it's difficult, it's more defined. You know, no, they really just helped fuel whatever I was passionate about. And so I'm very much focused on helping young adults, like
discover
young kids,
early on.
Not even young adult, right? The 8-year-olds version of me. Because in the Caribbean, what's different from maybe here in the US is that a lot of your life is decided so early. Like the subjects you had to take in high school, I had to know that by the end of third form, I guess, the equivalent of 11th grade or something. You're 13. Right? You have to decide, do you want to do sciences or business? And what does that even mean? And if you're
basically, once you choose, that's it.
Yes, that's at that point, that was it. So I remember just anxiety from even before, probably because my sisters were in that position, thinking I need to figure this out very quickly. But what I did like was, because the diversity of things my family had us do, even though we're not in the capital, right? We did swimming lessons. They found somewhere to bring us to swimming lessons. I used to I was very much into athletics. But I used to run competitively at the prep school level. I wish I continued. So, you know, I would go to Kingston and compete for swimming, compete for running. We did piano lessons. We did so much things that someone, when you say they're from the country, you feel like they don't have access to these things. Really, it was just a choice for our parents that it mattered to them that we get exposed to a range of things. I used to be president of a drama club. I had all these skills and talents, and they just allowed me to pick, you know, whatever it was I was going to go after. If I wanted to be a pop singer, sure, you know, do it. So I think and why I like your podcast, right? It's helping people understand there's so much more diverse careers that are also lucrative. Like, yes, maybe as a parent, you're thinking, I want someone to go on like tech is very, very lucrative. If you're just looking at that, if that is you want to make sure your child is like doing something where they will be okay.
Yeah.
Tech is that. So it blows my mind that not many people think or talk to their children about going into tech if that is their angle, where you want them to be financially like well off or comfortable or, but really it should be more based on the passion. I think tech is one of those fields where you could marry it to so many different things.
Yes.
So like, yes, I did Spanish. I didn't set out to do Spanish. My grandfather is from Cuba, so I just grew up with his love for Spanish and instilled in me. And again, my parents were like, hey, do all the things.
Do all the things.
So,
I like that.
They encouraged us to keep learning Spanish and through CXCs. My mom had dropped it when she was young, and so I remember her saying, I wish I had taken it. So just like really listening to them and saying, okay, let me do this. And then when I got to college, I was like, well, maybe let me minor in it. What happened was I ended up for a year part of college studying abroad in Spain. And I had taken so much classes when I got back. They're like, oh, now you have this major. So so I did computer science. The math was just a given.
Yes.
I was at a liberal arts school.
Okay.
And then because of the school, so there's I could talk a little bit about liberal arts engineering school and so on. I think that's good to know. I had no idea what a liberal arts school was. I applied to one. I had no idea till I went to one. Engineering school would probably have been the better choice if I wanted to do like computer science, like serious, hardcore computer science. However, as part of a liberal arts, you have to do humanities and social sciences. And to be fair with you, like the field I'm in, human-centered computing, it marries a lot of the skills of a social scientist with tech. And so a degree like a liberal arts is pretty good, or, going into liberal arts is probably one of the ways you get comfortable living across, the tech and the social science space.
Yes.
And so even though my now self was like, I should have gone to engineering school. So when I did my PhD, I went to Georgia Tech.
Okay. I
still respected the fact that my undergrad wasn't narrowly focused on engineering because it allowed me to straddle the line between like a tech and a more of a social science type career.
Yes.
And that's pretty much what I'm doing now. It's like I'm the bridge between the tech and the social science side as a researcher. And I love being in that space. And because I learned languages, now as a researcher, I am able to go to different countries like Portuguese, Spain. Well, I haven't researched in Spain, but but like Portuguese or Mexico, Brazil.
Okay, Brazil.
They speak Portuguese.
Yes.
Mexico, they speak Spanish. India, and just pick up a bit of other languages. Right. And that's actually something that's helped the work I'm doing. So that's kind of how all these things happily kind of merge together to help me be better in the role that I'm doing now.
That's quite beautiful. So there's a stigma that if you're a computer scientist, you lock yourself in a room and you just kind of want to code. And I think one of the other hypotheses that I have is that coming from the Caribbean, because we interact with just a ton of different people over time, that naturally allows us to have this affinity with speaking to many different types of people. And I think it also lends us doing really well at that intersection of both technical and interacting with people. So for instance, at NVIDIA, I'm a customer-facing data scientist. I'm not just a data scientist, we're just working on algorithms. My job is to make customers successful. And I tend to excel in customer-facing roles because I think, you're coming from home and just talking and naturally interfacing with a lot of people. And it seems to some degree that a significant portion of your job is not only, okay, you had a computer science background or you have a PhD that is very technical, but also, hey, your understanding of the social aspect of how you design products for people, in addition to just the softer side. And that is what allows you to express yourself in your career. So that's pretty cool there. PhD. So you wanted a PhD from since you were young. That's quite impressive. And I'm the complete opposite. I didn't think I would ever go to school because I just kind of hate school in general. So it's very interesting and inspiring, to be honest, to know that at such a young age, you kind of knew where you wanted to go. So it's great that at least folks listening, they can see both ends of the spectrum as well. One of the things I did notice in your career history is you had 6 internships, I counted. So talk to us about how you were so aggressive in getting internships. I think out of all the people I've interviewed, I think you have the most internships so far, which is very interesting.
Oh, that's a great question. At some point, I actually hid how many internships I had. I was like, I wonder if someone would think I'm just like in love with school. I never want to leave. So I've had 7 internships actually.
Okay.
And the reason is when I started undergrad, except for the very first summer, from my sophomore year onwards, I've always had an internship.
Wow.
And I've had that many because I've done undergrad, I've done a master's, I've done a PhD, which is 5 years. And so almost every summer, I think with the exception of 2 summers, very beginning of undergrad and very beginning of or midway through PhD, every other summer I've had an internship, and they're life-changing.
Impressive.
So in undergrad, I had a software engineering internship. And that was great because I did do the traditional, like sit at a computer and code, which I loved. I worked at Lockheed Martin, which is, really big. You're in Florida, so it's very,
nice.
I worked in Orlando, actually, every summer. In tech, internships are paid, right? So if you need money, do an internship. And if you're in tech internships pay really well. They also give you really good exposure. It's great on your resume, helps you build your network. So money aside, there are just other things that make it make sense. And like, what else do you do in your summer? So and you get friends. They're usually fun, as in a lot of companies go out for their internship programs and build really good experiences. And I've gotten to travel, right? So I've gotten to live in other places as a result. So for me, it was like a win-win. So even if I was going to take the summer off and travel, well, let me make some money, travel while doing my internship. And, when I did a software engineering, I realized I loved programming. It was a career for me, as in like going into computer science. But I wanted to be a part of figuring out what it is that we were even going to build and why and for who. So I was missing that part, that human connection part. It was, we were very much the stereotype at the time, just programming at a computer, never really talking to the end users or anything.
Okay.
And I mean, I think things have changed a lot since then, in terms of the expectations of a software engineer, for sure. I work with a lot now, and I take them to the field, and they work and speak directly to people, aka users. But yeah, I wanted more. So I didn't really know what area of computer science I wanted to go into coming out of my undergrad experience. So I thought robotics initially. But that's why I did a master's. I was like, before I commit to a PhD, I need to figure out what exact area I should go into.
Yes.
So I did another like general degree, a master's. It's part of that, the very first semester, I found out about human. I did a class on human computer interaction. That was the first time I heard about it.
Okay.
And simultaneously, I got invited to Google for a workshop for women engineers.
Oh,
and a
cool.
part of the talk, there was a person talking about user experience, and she had a PhD, and she was doing research globally. And I was like, this is me. Like, I love to travel. So I'd at this point traveled quite a lot during undergrad. And when I did a master's, coming back from that, I was like, okay, I want to go into user experience and I want to focus more on building global products. Or technology, you leveraging technology to improve international development. So I did part of my research in South Africa. I spent some time at University of Cape Town. I traveled quite a bit. Like, my master's was like a lot of traveling. PhD was even more. So I would travel to present at different conferences. I would work with different communities. For instance, like I said, I went back to the Caribbean for months on end, like doing research there. I work with immigrants and refugees elsewhere. I would travel to present my research. So I had such a global outlook at that point. My last 2 internships landed at Google.
Okay.
It took me that long still to even, get through to Google. It didn't happen overnight. From the very first time I got invited as a master's, I didn't land an internship. It was actually my path to Google was interesting because as part of doing my dissertation research, I was applying for funding.
Okay.
And I got denied the funding. But they're like, oh, but we like your work. Maybe you should consider, I was working in social networking at the time, and, maybe you could consider coming to work for Google Plus. And I was like, And so I had 2 conversations, which to this day, I don't think they were really interviews. And I ended up with the internship working on Google Plus when it was the really big thing. And that was exciting for me. I, moved to Silicon Valley for the summer, worked there. Then I got invited back a whole year in advance for a second internship, which is great as a student because it means you just do your work and you have another internship lined up. But I was very intentional. The second time I said, I'm only coming if I can focus on doing something that's focused on international development or is more global, is more focused on building a global product, or that was more true to my brand. So there was a small team, Search International is what it was called at the time, and they sat in London, and they didn't really have that team sitting in the US. So they're like, well, there's this team. And I spoke to the manager, and she's like, well, we've never had an intern, but she made a role. It was a little bit of a gamble for me, but one I was willing to take because they needed to get approvals. And if I was trying to go for that, I couldn't get placed in another internship.
I see.
Just in another
so just that's all you got.
And if I didn't get placed, I couldn't come back, even if you had an offer, right? So ultimately worked out, and I had to do my second internship in London, which was great. The topic was great. I focused on helping improve search for multicultural users, essentially, just people with dual language, for instance. And so I got to work with communities and groups I cared a lot about, like immigrants and so on.
Yes.
I got to work in a new country. And I still got to travel. Like, my weekends, I was in Amsterdam, I was gone. So, like, I am an internship queen, intern queen. I highly recommend internship experience. And leaving, coming out of that summer, I had an offer a year in advance for a full-time position.
Very cool.
Like, that's invaluable. And
not just any offer, like an offer to Google, correct?
Yes, to Google. Wow. Yeah. So I came out, and I worked at Google, and that was great. So even though I've been at Google now coming up 7 years, I've had such diversity of experience coming out of my internships that I knew enough what kind of company I wanted to work for. So when I made that decision to go to Google, it wasn't because it was this fancy title. It was this company and I didn't really know about their culture. No, I knew about the culture. I knew about working at, other big tech companies because I had other internships. Yes. And I knew what worked and didn't work. I knew that, okay, traditional SWE was great, but I wanted to do more research. And I got to figure out how, because someone who's done a PhD typically is maybe going into academia.
Right. Or
and so it could be hard to figure out, well, what does that mean in industry? And that the only way I could figure that out was through doing internships. And that's how I knew. I was like, industry is for me. So now I am like split between academia and industry because I am an adjunct professor.
I saw that at Carnegie Mellon, right?
But I knew that industry was where I needed to be. And then once an opportunity came up where I could teach, I grabbed that because I remember what it's in undergrad not having great, when I started out not having been taught the way that would have made sense for someone with my background. Yes. And I remember doing my PhD having really great professors. And so I wanted to, even though I never really imagined becoming a professor, I think having those both experiences, the good and the bad, and saying, hey, I could be part of influencing someone else's career decision or providing that bridge between what it means to like be in academia and industry, and also expose someone to the field that I'm in. I'm doing research in a in a technical company. That's something I can offer. So I think that being an adjunct professor has been great addition to like what I'm doing, and pretty much just the same me doing the same things, like talking about research or doing research or talking about building products, talking about problem solving, talking about innovation, things I do in my regular job, but then I can then package that and teach that to someone else. Yes. Which also improves me and my skills as a practitioner. I have to stay relevant. I have to stay well read and things like that. So I think that's been my happy medium. Between being where I could say, okay, yeah, it was really great that I had a PhD. Another thing to say is like a PhD wasn't really necessary for the role that I'm in, right? So like a master's would have been great. I've had people I know people from undergrad who are in the field, right? So it's really a choice. And you do it does give you a different skill set, really. Yes. So if doing a PhD is something that makes sense, then do it by all means. If if you're someone who's like, I am not interested in that much school, don't do it. Don't do it. Do a master's and go, you'll be fine on the job as well, right? So I feel like, in the industry anyway, you're mastering your area. It's just that at the end of the day, you don't get that PhD title. Yes, exactly. What the PhD does allow is time to go deep. Sometimes you don't get that in industry. Things can be very fast-paced.
And you don't get your choice to work on something that maybe you might want to work on as well.
Yes. And I think I think that's maybe helps you advocate for more projects or work that aligns to, when you come out with a PhD, you're probably more focused on like, hey, I want it to align to the things that I'm passionate about. You might end up being more vocal about that because that a lot of us choose to do a PhD because we want to focus on this one very niche thing for like 5 to 6 years for whatever reason. And in industry, I've been able to say, hey, this is my brand, so this is what I need to be able to. I need to focus on things that are broad-reaching, global facing, that are gonna, require, what should I say, deep understanding of diverse users. Yes. different countries and cultures. And that would try to make a meaningful impact,
Absolutely.
not just meet bottom line. So
That, you keep mentioning your brand. You want to maybe expand on that, and I guess more specifically for the younger folks that are listening, maybe you're still in high school, you're in college, and I think your own brand is something I've been spending more time thinking about recently, in terms of, people tell you, okay, focus on what you think your career is, but then I don't hear many people speaking about what's your brand, and I think that's maybe a better vehicle to think about versus like what's your career. Career seems very separate from yourself to a degree, and I like the fact that you're calling brand out explicitly.
Yeah, so why I call myself a problem solver is to get rid of all the very specific titles.
Okay, makes sense.
And that's kind of like my brand is helping making life better for people. A part of that is helping them solve problems.
Okay.
And that brand is true whether I'm working in tech, whether I'm starting a nonprofit. It's like or whether I'm teaching. It's like the same things. I'm helping people
it has no borders, right?
Improve their life or to help enable them to accomplish something. So one of the I really passionate about helping startups and small businesses. And I think it's the same reason I help youth, where I feel like how you start is really the critical place or thing you need to figure out is starting in the right way.
Yeah.
Whether it's starting a business, doing a startup, are you solving the right problem? Because a lot of startups fail because they're solving something that either doesn't matter to other people, maybe it was their own problem, or they're doing it in a way that doesn't matter to other people.
Yes.
Except so they're solving something just for them. And so as a researcher, it's like helping people understand what the problem is and the right way to solve it. And so when I help startups, I can be a part of that process. When I help small business, I could be a part of that process. When I'm helping youth, it's like helping them start, right? Like figure out what you're passionate about, right? So
yes.
And pursue that and help unblock them along the way. So I love being a part of the very early stage of things.
Yes.
Where things aren't as defined, where it feels impossible, or if we're talking about industry, where there isn't a strategy. So another part of how I brand myself is just as a strategist, like within industries, like really helping us companies unlock or determine what the strategy is for a product, a new product, or an existing product.
Right.
So a part of being a problem solver, focused on people problems and helping people start the right way. I also like tech and innovation.
Yes.
And so that's infused into everything I do. And I love having more of a global purview of things. So I travel a lot. So I focus on doing things where I need to solve maybe the same issue, but for different people in different places, different cultures, and that forces me to think outside the box, right?
Yes.
What works in one country may not in another. You may have to build something ground up. And so I love being a part of that process with helping companies figure that out.
That makes sense.
What should we build? How, for who? How should it manifest in different places? And at the end of the day, is it doing what it's supposed to do? Are you improving someone's life, someone's outcome? So that's
Great.
that's kind of like my brand in a nutshell. And so
Yeah.
um
I like how you explain that.
yeah.
It's, and that's the thread that you sort of act with in anything that you kind of do at work or new projects that you take on. You're always kind of checking against that brand definition, essentially, right?
Yeah. Are we doing something that is solving a problem someone has in a way that is impactful, and in a way that we aren't excluding others in the process? So
Understood.
ensuring that we're doing it for everyone, everywhere, and that forces you to really talk to all really connect with people and their stories and learn from them. So that inquirer, I think, is a part of inquiry is like a core part of me, just always asking questions and listening. It's
Yes.
a core part of my brand too, and what I do. And then having always been optimistic. Optimism is a part of my brand. I think innovation is born out of like a sense that everything has some solution. You just have to really think through it.
Yes.
And so I don't shy from a challenge as a result. Don't shy from problems that seem difficult. I love working on complex issues because of that.
Yeah, you did computer science. That's just probably like a fundamental tenet to go make something that probably didn't exist before.
Yeah.
Great. So in the last segment of the podcast, we've gotten a nice deep dive of your career so far. And this is more or less like the real core advice section. And what two pieces of advice or piece of advice would you give to a high schooler, someone in college, and a professional? Just, it could be completely generic, but just something that, that aligns very well with you that maybe someone might resonate with.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
It sounds generic, but that love for learning is what keeps you evolving.
Okay.
From a child as a young adult, just that passion to that everything is learnable, if that's a word. And it's just a matter of how much time and effort and energy you put into something. So you can't do everything. So the second advice is like, figure out really, I don't just want to leave it on the table what your passions are. But when you think about the moments that you could get lost into something, what is that thing?
Right.
And why do you think you're drawn to it? Like, so reflect a lot. You don't necessarily need to go in the wilderness and figure out what your passions are. They're already known, right? And if you haven't tried enough things, try a lot of things.
Yes.
As many things as you can. Doesn't matter the age. So I'm a serial hobbyist for that reason. And at some point I realized, I really like tennis. I never got to play tennis when I was young.
Okay.
And I like golf. And those are areas that just your traditional, at least for golf, right? You wouldn't find someone like me in that area. Try all kinds of things, right? Same for career. So if you're in like high school or before, try all the clubs, do athletics, do arts and drama, do everything, right?
You're right.
You might figure out, you like do some sciences, do some business, right? I think when we ask kids to kind of make a choice, the choice may be a mashup of multiple things. I think that's what you're aiming to figure out, because that's what makes you unique. Like, what is your mashup of things? Like for me, it was technology. It was my love for travel and my love for just problem solving, all combined into one that I ended up in a career that was really what I'm doing has been my dream job. It's not what defines me. What defines me are those passions, right? And so that could evolve into other things later in life.
Yes.
So stay curious, do all the things, and really stop and, reflect on what mashup of things like really speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the intersection of that and say, okay, what does that mean for what my brand is and what I do moving forward? Like those things are stable over time, and your career or who you work for, the title you have, those things could change. But the things that
The core elements.
the core elements are should be stable over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, if you're not tied to a specific title, a specific company, a specific what should I say, manifestation of those core passions, if you're not tied to that, that means you could do a lot of things. Right. And you have no problem in life in terms of getting stuck, or if you're without a job, you figure out how to you're still gonna be continuing to evolve your passions, even if it's like for a year you're doing you're doing podcasts.
Yes,
you can still, or so that would be the advice I would say. I would say there doesn't have to be this like life-changing moment where like, okay, I found it, I this is it. It just reflect on your life and pause and really think, what are the things that have been true part of your brand or over time? What are the things you're drawn to, and what are new things you could try that you might find add to what you're passionate about?
Yep, I like the mashup and the new things. I like the serial hobbyist thing. I'm definitely, I have my golf clubs behind me.
Oh, nice.
Piano. The golf clubs have not moved in like years. So just throwing that out there. But
exactly, yeah. But you've tried, right? So you
and if I want to play, I can just go grab it and go,
And there's nothing lost, because if it isn't something that is what you end up doing long term, you have some knowledge of it. Innovation, I think, is great when you have a wide range of knowledge of different fields and different things, and you can bring those things together.
Yes.
So I think
it's almost a prerequisite to go be pushing into new things. Yeah.
So adding to do all the things is learn as much as you can. And it doesn't have to be in traditional school. It's I do a lot of, for instance, Udemy courses. I took piano on Udemy. I took investing on Udemy. I took, building a website, even though I had gone to school to do these things. 2 years, I'm like, let me see how like they would teach it somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Or taking language classes. So like right now, if you look at with the pandemic, there's so much more things happening online that you could do virtually, right? So I didn't have time to go back and like go to a piano studio. I did piano as little and in college. I know I could do it virtually with like a teacher. So like I do that. I'm learning a language virtually, all the things where I would probably have had to physically go to a place. I'm like, oh, I have half an hour. I'm working from home, mostly now these days until we know when we can go back to work. How can I like maximize my learning? Like the downtime I have, how can I use it meaningfully? That's something that really matters to me. One of your questions may be like, what books do you recommend?
Hey, you know what's coming.
One of the book I recommend that really did have an impact on me. It's a very quick read, The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do, by Charles Duhigg.
It's like a yellow book, right?
Yes, it's a yellow book. I remember when I read it and I thought, well, what's I talk a lot about, like, I do a lot, and people ask, well, how can you do so much? That was one of the reasons I was able to do a lot, because I really focused on time management and how I was spending my time and how I could implement healthy habits, I would say, where I could feel more in control of my time. And when I read that book, I was like, well, what is the one thing you shouldn't focus on changing everything. What's like one thing you could change? At the time, I thought it was working out in the morning. Now, mark you, this was me again, where what matters to you versus what matters to other people. So I made a habit of, I was going to wake up early and get to work when we're still working in the office and do like a group class first thing in the morning. What that forced me to do was wake up earlier. I didn't define myself as a morning person.
Right.
And I was now waking up at 5 twice a week to get to work early enough to do like a morning class.
Yes.
And I really realized, working out it's just never been my thing. I'm the kind of person like, let me go play tennis, which is why I do like other like hobbies. Like that's just how I get my workout.
Yes.
But what that experience made me realize is the days I wasn't waking up as early was hard. Trying to wake up early the other 2 days. So I was like, well, what if I would just wake up early every day and get to work by 7? I realized, so the days I did not go to work out, I realized I got 2 hours in of work before anyone else came in the office, and it changed my whole day.
Wow.
I ultimately dropped the group workout lesson because I was like, what if I could do this 5 days a week? What that did was free up my evenings.
Yeah.
And now once I started teaching, for instance, I teach in the evenings. I don't teach the whole year either, right? I teach like half the year, which is good because I travel a lot. So I'd maximize the other half of the year to do that. But then it means I could finish a full work day in a way where I feel like I'd made some meaningful dent. In the first 2 hours, I do the hardest things I have to do because I'm someone like, once people start talking to me, my productivity declines.
Gone. Yeah.
And so to this day, I still wake up really early. And now I've taken a quiz and it says, oh, your AM shifted. And I was like, I've never have called myself like a morning person, but I did unlock the fact that my productivity was in fact very early in the morning.
Yes.
And I built that habit thinking it was meant to work out. And that unlocked my evenings and weekends because I was so much more productive with the 5-day work week that I could then like start a nonprofit that I run on the weekends or teach in the evenings and still like have time to go play tennis, which I realized, okay, I prefer working out in the evening. It's for me. And I prefer just doing like tennis class or something like
some activity,
jump rope. And yes, I wasn't really much of the gym type. So, which again, it matters to understand your personal situation. Like, don't necessarily just copy anyone else. Understand what works for you, but really figure out how you could build good habits.
Yes. That was excellent.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you just went exploring for something but you took away different lessons regardless of whether or not you're like, all right, I'm not doing that anymore, but I'm still going to keep these facets of this activity and move on.
And that's been maybe, I would say 5 years now.
Wow.
That one change has, I would say, single-handedly freed up my capacity to do so much more.
Yes.
And so I always look at my time and what I'm doing and how I'm spending it and how I could build better habits. So instead of complaining I don't have time to do things, how can I maximize it? And that might change, right? Your family situation may change, other things may change, but I think knowing that you still are in control of your habits and your time and how it's being spent and what you're doing, and figuring out just the one thing you could start with, nothing major that just could have a ripple effect on everything else. I think that's, that's critical. And start anywhere, right? It's an iterative process. So I didn't start with what really ultimately worked for me, but I started for different reasons, for health. And that became into like, oh, this is how I could be productive at work. More productive at work if I just start before people start.
Yeah, that's great. Any other book recommendations you have?
So The War of Art.
You know what? That damn book. I've been reading that book and it's just like go do it. And it's a good book.
Audiobooks work.
Audiobook, yeah.
Audiobooks work. That's another thing. I'm really key on maximizing my productivity or learning and infusing that in micro moments, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there.
Okay.
I'm jumping in the car driving. So I built a habit of like having an audiobook on hand or having like a language app on hand where I'm like learning some new words.
Micro learning right here. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I still jump on Instagram every now and then, but I just don't use it as much as before. Like it's not consuming most of my time. My time is going to all these other things that I love. I really enjoy.
Yes.
That's the thing. Because if you're learning something that's interesting to you, it's actually pretty enjoyable. So if you're learning something and it's not like high school where you have to do it because you just have to, you're forced to. All these things that you're doing should be things tied to your passion and something that you would like watching Netflix versus doing like, they're kind of like, okay, both are enjoyable. And you can do both, like nothing's matters, but you should find something that's so enjoyable that you would probably say, hey, I don't mind not watching Netflix to do this thing.
Makes sense.
Because they're both like enjoyable to me.
Great.
So the War of Art is a good one because a lot of people want to start something, write a book. It's actually written more for writers who kind of have writer's block and they just never get started and finish that book that they have to do. But it applies to so many different things like starting a business, starting a new career or learn, just
that book got me to start this podcast. I think I was reading it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Like, all right, I just need to go do this. And
exactly. Great. And then there are some others, like there's a book called Side Hustles.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Where you could turn all your random like activities that you're doing on the side into something that generates revenue. And who doesn't want more revenue? And if you don't want it, earn it and give it away, right? And then if for those maybe looking to get into user experience, I picked The Inmates Are Running the Asylum.
What?
It's a classic read for people going into user experience. It says why high-tech products drive us crazy and how to restore the sanity. This pretty much sums up my job, right? Is to improve our tech products and services, design them in ways that the technology isn't forcing some form of interaction that isn't natural for people. But it's the other way around, right? Redesigning and rethinking our user interfaces, our products, our services from how people expect to navigate or interact with them. And then the technology is infused after, right? So it's like more of a people-centered approach. So that's one of the classic reads, but I think it's just a fun read regardless if anyone wants to maybe understand more about user experience, even if you're not getting into it. That's like a fun read and a fun title because the inmates are running the asylum, right? So it's your software engineers or whoever's building the code, right? They're gonna historically were the ones pushing out products and not necessarily stopping to think about the end user,
right?
And so this is like why we need to stop and rethink that. So I think it's a good read for those who want to hear more about user experience, the field of user interface design or anything like that.
Great. And I guess you have any good books on design?
There is the design of everyday thing.
Okay.
The design of everyday things, which is another classic read for designers. It will open your awareness of just how we embed our values or how we help or hinder people with the way we design products. So and it will unfortunately make you hate doors. So really? I will leave you to read the book. But the first thing you'll become hyper aware of how a door is designed and how you even understand whether you push or pull it. And if you push a door that's meant to be pulled, it's not your fault. It's the fault of the designer. So that's like the heart of it, is really that it's never the user that you blame. It's bad design. Anything that someone can't use or has difficulty using is because it was poorly designed. And so it shifts the blame from like, when we say, oh yeah, my mom can't use certain things because she's older. No, it's you designed it poorly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great read to get into design. And then of course there are more, traditional design books, but I think some of those.
That's a good one to
that is like, if you're doing user experience 101, you're gonna read Inmates Are Running the Asylum, and you're gonna read the design, Don Norman's Design of Everyday Things. Alan Cooper, Don Norman are like classic names in the HCI space.
Gotcha. Well, once again, I appreciate your time. I enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot, and I think I know after reading some of these books, hopefully I don't get too annoyed at those. I walk through a fair amount of them.
Yeah. I love to put a plug for a few things. So
absolutely, yes.
In terms of the foundation, so the Azarae Foundation is supports youth across the Caribbean. So if anyone's interested in supporting youth, mentoring youth, or sharing about your careers to different youth, like, you can reach out to us there. If you're interested in user experience, I actually run a group that's specific for Black UX practitioners, and that's called the Black UX Network. So you can also connect there if you're interested in user experience as a minority and want to connect with others in that community. We're seeking to just grow the number of Black UX practitioners.
Yes.
And yeah, either of those places you can find me, Azarae Foundation or Black UX Network, on Twitter, on Instagram. I don't use Twitter as much anymore. So
great, and I'll make sure and have those links in the show notes so everyone can definitely get in contact with you. And once again, I've appreciated your reminder to maybe not get too stuck on the titles, especially you work for one of the top tech companies in the world, and just keep doing things, trying things, staying curious. It's been a great conversation. And do the hard things. That's a big one.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. You have a great day.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.